You guys might have seen this guy before. He's quite famous thanks to television series and movies and whatnot these days. This is Leonardo da Vinci. He lived somewhere around in the 1400s. But how I know him and what he means to me is probably different from what you might have seen from series or TV series and movies. So he was the quintessential Renaissance man. He was a polymath. He was known for doing a whole lot of things. He was an inventor. He was a cartologist. He was a botanist. He was an engineer. He was a mathematician. He was an anatomist. He was a sculptor. He was a painter. He painted the Mona Lisa, which you probably would have heard of. But the thing about him that most inspires me is this. I don't know if you guys can see this, but these are detailed drawings of human anatomy. Now, Da Vinci was a very, very curious man. He was so curious that he was driven to go to the morgue at night and take fresh dead bodies, corpses, down to his workshop. And he dissected them. He had very little time to do this because there was no cooling technology back then. It took him as little time as he could to dissect a body because the body would start rotting otherwise. And he would dissect the bodies as methodologically and as carefully as possible. And when you look at these drawings in detail, you can see the detail that he went into. It took the eye of an artist, the curiosity of a scientist to draw these things. He had detailed diagrams of the veins, of the muscles, and even of the heart. So he did the whole body, dissecting bit by bit every night. And sometimes, because he was driven by curiosity, he didn't do it totally above board. He might steal bodies. But that's what curiosity does. One of the things that he dissected was the heart. And this is where he differentiates him from mere curiosity. He dissected the heart and then he found out where the aorta is, what the different chambers of the heart does. And he was so intrigued by the heart that he took the heart of an ox and he injected melted wax into it. And he made a cast from glass and then he pumped water with a suspension of grass seeds so that he could see how the heart worked. Now this was done in the 1400s and nobody until the 1980s came this close to understanding the human heart as much as he did. Now it was unfortunate for us humans, for the whole human species, that his notes were never published. He died before he could publish them. But had it been published, it would have revolutionized human understanding of the body and the heart. So, my name is Jawish Hameed. I do a lot of things. I'm driven by a lot of things. I studied something called artificial intelligence. I have a master's in artificial intelligence and cybernetics from the University of Reading in the UK. Currently, I work as a partner and chief software architect at a local software development firm called Semicolon. I don't know what the last line disappeared to, but yeah, I'm also a co-founder of an organization called and activist at an organization called Maldivian Association for Advancement of Science. So since finishing my master's, that's the two things that I've been up to. So tonight, my talk is going to be about curiosity, because I think that's what drives me. That's what my life has always been about. And curiosity is about inquisitive thinking. It's the desire to learn, the desire to know things. When I see something working, the first urge I get is to take it apart and making something new. I was very lucky to have awesome parents who didn't mind me doing a whole lot of experimenting with things. One of my earliest memories is from when I was about 5. I had just started learning about electronics, basic electricity and all that stuff. I had a motor, I had resistors, I had batteries, that sort of thing. And so I see other kids blowing bubbles. But I don't know, for whatever reason, the idea that comes to my mind was, how do I make it do that automatically without me doing it? I mean, you might say it's taking the piss out of enjoying blowing a bubble, but that's my bubble maker. That's a crude sketch from what I remember it to be. So basically I had a motor, a propeller, a little loop, and the little loop would be dunked in soap, water, and the battery would run. But Maldives is a hard place to grow up for a curious person, I found out. It's hard to get stuff, especially when I was a kid. It's hard to get stuff. So I didn't know how to make the motor run any slower. So the trick was I had to let the battery run out a bit so that the motor would turn a bit slow and that would generate bubbles. But that worked. So there goes. So that was when I was about 5. So when I got into primary school, it opened up a whole new world for me, the library. There was science books there was books on people, there was books on history, story books, lots of things. And I liked reading, I read a lot. I liked reading more than going to school. And there was this book, I think it was called 101 or 1001 Experiments. And I would borrow that book every day and do experiments from the book. And the librarian got quite upset with me because I kept taking the same book and nobody got the chance to read that book. So when she tried to not let me take the book, I had ways of getting the book. Let's just leave it at that. But yeah, it was fun. So this was one of the other things that got me interested. I mean, this isn't the most complex ones. This isn't the most meaningful ones. But it taught me something. This is a steam power board. It's relatively simple. I made this when I was in grade 2 or something. It had a candle. It floated in water. And there was a copper tube in that went. And it was during that time I realized that even if things are not available in Mali, there are ways to get things. Dumpster diving, going through other people's dump, trash. So I found the copper tubing in somebody's trash, so I used that. And it was a learning experience for me. Then I moved on to more complex stuff when I was in about grade 4. I was building radio transmitters. And for a kid from an island, holed up in his room and building transmitters and radio receivers and receiving signals coming from the US, from Australia, from a radio receiver that you had built yourself, that was very, very moving. I had felt something that to this day gives me chills, and that's what drives me. Building new things. The rush that it gives is unparalleled to anything else in the world. And at one point, I had my own radio station running from my home, so it was fun for a kid in grade 4. And then things got more complex when I reached about grade 7. I got into high voltage, and this is where things got really fun. This is a diagram of a very simple, one of my first coil guns. Now, what is a coil gun? A coil gun is a gun that fires without using gunpowder. Now, this thing can accelerate that projectile, that bullet, to about 60 miles per hour, which is quite not bad. With 2 stages, it goes faster. So it was fun building stuff. And that's a capacitor bank that can store quite a lot of charge. And then you could build things like Jacob's ladder. You probably have seen it on movies or something, where the sparks fly up 2 wires. And building those stuff gave me lots of ideas. So that's when I first had my idea of experimenting with myself. I thought, ooh, these electrodes do funny things to circuits and other things. What if I connect them to myself? Now, I didn't know much about safety and blah, blah, blah. Or even if I even if I knew them, I would normally ignore them. So I connected 2 electrodes to my hands. It was running about 2000 volts, which is quite high, yeah. So I decided to touch the 2 wires. And when I touched, the last thing I remember was touching the wires. And then I woke up around an hour later in my room. Now, before I did this experiment, I had the good mind to lock my door, to make sure that my mom wasn't around, because she wouldn't approve. Yeah, hi mom, if she's seen this, yeah. So I zonked out for about an hour, and then when I woke up, I had chills all over my body. My hair was on its edge, and my heart was burning. But it was a very good lesson. I knew not to do it again, kinda. Then I found new people to experiment on, because then my mom had this massager that would stimulate little bits of muscle, and then that would massage the muscles and whatever. So I learned how it worked, and I learned that it was sending electronic pulses. So I thought I should build that, but I had the good mind not to do it on myself, so I did it on my brother, and he ended up with a scar. Yep, he ended up with a scar on his leg, but yeah, I bribed him not to tell my mother I think he kept it up for a day without telling my mother. So yeah, so I kept doing stuff in electronics for a while, and then finally I got to the stage where I wanted to do microcontrollers, which are chips. Now, chips were pretty new back then. I didn't have a computer. There wasn't a computer at my place. So I borrowed the computer from an uncle who would lend me his computer in exchange for like fixing his stuff and all that. So when I got his PC, the first thing I started doing was learning programming. And that opened up a whole new world for me. From my room, I could decode a whole lot of stuff. Now, one of the fun things I did as a kid when I was I think it was in grade 9 or 8 back then, was decoding the pager signals. Now, nobody had mobile phones back then. People had pager signals, and people were sending pager signals all, come home, I miss you, I don't know, things like that. So I hooked it up, built a radio receiver at the right frequency to receive those things, got the programs necessary for it, wrote the custom bits that needed to be done, and voila, the whole thing was running real time, and any pager signal that was sent, it came up on my screen. That was pretty awesome. But then I had to decide. Well, things got quite far before I started deciding about things. I learned about phone systems, I learned about a whole lot of security stuff and all that stuff. I could make calls for free, I could do, I don't know, things, break into locks and all that stuff. So I had to decide whether that's a direction I would want to go in. As a kid, to have that much freedom is quite interesting. You wonder whether there is a line that you would cross, because even if I crossed it, nobody would find out about it. No third person knew about it, because as long as I don't tell my parents or any of my friends, nobody would know about it. And that was the freedom offered by the digital age. But I decided not to go there. Yeah. So I got into building software. One of the first things that I released onto the net was bots. And then I wrote something called Messenger++. Now, and most of these software were driven by my curiosity again. Now, Messenger++ is, you guys use Windows Messenger, right? MSN Messenger. Now, I was very curious about how it worked, because lots of people used it. And the protocols used in it weren't very public. So I decided to reverse engineer it, which means understanding how the communication went and how Microsoft knows you're online, how you send chat messages and all that stuff. So I started looking at the underlying systems and learning that. And through that, I realized that there is neat tricks that can be done with it. So I built this software called Messenger++, and it turned out to be quite a big hit. There were about, I think, 4 million downloads worldwide. I even found it at a local CD store on one of those foreign, how do you call it, software CDs, collection CDs. So I was quite proud of myself. I was about in grade 10, or no, 11 back then. So I built a whole lot of software, and that took me from my journey of electronics and software. And then I came across this. This was the cover of Wired magazine, and on it was featured this guy, and it said, iRobot cybernetics pioneer Kevin Warwick. And it introduced me to a field called cybernetics, which I went on to study. But here's the interesting thing. When I first came across this and read it, it fascinated me. It had everything I loved. It had engineering, it had biology, it had computing, it dealt with brain, which I love, which is the brain is the most complex organ in the whole universe that we know of. What's there not to love about it? But I never thought that I would end up studying it. But then 5 years later, I had the good opportunity to go to the same university that this guy was at. Now, and when it came to do my master's research, I had already been thinking about what project that I wanted to do. And most of the people, they take set projects that's proposed by the supervisors, by the PhD people, the lecturers and all that stuff at the university. But I had my own idea, so I went to this guy and asked him if he would supervise my project. And he said yes. What lucky me. So this was my idea. It was a subdermal magnetic implant interface. That's a big mouthful. So the idea was to implant tiny magnets into my fingers. So there are no boundaries when it comes to me and my body. So I decided to implant tiny magnets into my fingers. And then that would in turn be controlled by external coils. And the coil and the controlling circuitry would make the magnet move in the way that I want it to move. And the movement is sort of perceived as vibrations. And we can train the brain into recognizing these signals. And this is a pretty gory video, so I'll skip. That's me getting the magnet implanted. So I'll skip that for a bit. But that's not been done by a qualified doctor, because the doctors at the university, and I went to all of them, they wouldn't do it because this was highly experimental. There were insurance liabilities, so none of them would do it. So my supervisor said, go find somebody that would do it. And the guy that would do it happens to be called Dr. Evil. Yeah, that's his video. He's called Dr. Evil. He's a body modification artist. He implants stuff into people's bodies, and he had never done this, so it was his first time doing it. And when he was doing it, he didn't have the proper tools to do it. And he had metal tools, so when it was a tiny magnet. It was about 0.7 millimeters by 3 millimeters, so it was a tiny magnet. And the thing kept sticking to his tools. So he went out after half an hour of giving, and finally gave up. He went out. He brought an ice cream stick from an ice cream vendor down the road. And then he brought that and he shoved the magnet with the ice cream stick. And that's how I got my 2 magnetic implants into my 2 fingers. And it took the whole thing 1.5 hours. I was bleeding. And the funny thing is, the UK laws doesn't allow the use of anesthetics. So the guy used some dodgy stuff. I don't know what it is. I had burns on my fingers, but it healed quite well. And when it healed, I knew my idea was going to succeed back then, because as soon as my fingers healed, I could feel magnetic fields. If I were to put my fingers near a current carrying wire, I could feel that. I could feel washing machines, I could feel microwaves working, and that was a very, very interesting feeling. So yeah, and because this was done sort of not at a hospital, I had to remove the stitches myself, and that's me with the 2 magnetic implants. And that's the final product that I came up with. So what does it do? Basically, the idea was to send signals to the brain. And I explored 2 things, and I demonstrated 2 things as working. One was using ultrasonic signals and sending it to the brain. So I had a cap, and there was something called an ultrasonic range on my cap, and that would send out signals. It would bounce and calculate the distance and then send it to my brain. So within a couple of days of training, I could close my eyes or blindfold myself, and then I could move around a room, and I can tell that there is a wall. Now the idea was that we could use this as a tool for blind people, as an assistive tool for blind people to navigate around. And within a week of using it, I could blindfold myself and then walk around this room without bumping into anything. So it was quite awesome. And the other thing was, I came up with an idea for normal people, for people without a disability. I thought, every time I get a text message, I have to take out my phone. But what if I don't have to do that? What if I could send those signals straight to my brain? So what I did was interface my phone with my circuitry and send the signal, SMS signal, convert the text messages into signals through the magnet through my brain. And then when I receive a text message, I could read it in my brain. I didn't have to look at the phone. And that was pretty awesome. And I was the first person to do it. Nobody had come up with this whole subdermal magnetic implant idea ever before. It was a new idea. And that's why we ended up publishing a paper. And that guy that I saw on the magazine cover, I ended up publishing my first scientific paper with. That was pretty cool. I didn't even imagine doing that. So yeah, enough about me. But that's my journey of curiosity. The human journey in curiosity is much more grand and humbling. There's science, and that's what really, really moves me. It's institutionalized curiosity. It guides curiosity. It's the single most important human endeavor that humans have ever attempted. So my message to you tonight is be curious. There's lots of things to be curious. Read books. The Brief History of Time, it tells you about the universe. The Selfish Gene, it tells you about your genes, what makes you tick, and a whole lot of things. And I want to end my talk with this. This is a photograph, and this means a lot to me. This is a photograph of something taken from near Saturn. This is known as the pale blue dot image. Somewhere along this picture is Earth. Can you see it? You probably can't, because it's barely a pixel when seen from Saturn. Earth is that insignificant. Earth is that small. And I want to read something written by the guy who was in charge of the Voyager program that took this picture. So from this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest, but for us it's different. Consider that dot again. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. And that's what science has revealed us. It's shown us our place in the universe, and we have to be thankful that we are alive, and we have to keep exploring to see what's more out there and see if there's more people like us or other intelligent beings elsewhere in the universe. So yeah, thank you.